Yo, ho ho, and a bottle of rum. I don't know, that's whatever. Sometimes when I film these videos, / every time I film a video, it's basically just an exercise in stream of consciousness. That's just what I do. This is my wrap up for February. Oh no, I messed my hair up. Let's talk about books. I read 27 books this month, which is not a lot for me. It was sort of like November of last year, which was my worst reading month ever. There's less days in February, so I feel like if there were more days, 2 more days, I could have gotten more books done. It doesn't matter. Let's talk about books. So I did have 3 DNFs. First one, the roughest draft. Technically, this is not in my 27 because I actually read it. I read, I don't know, like half of it in November of last year, which is when I started my vlog that this was featured in. But I did want to talk about it because I never talked about it in 2024. This book is about 2 authors who they met in, I think at a creative writing class. I can't remember where they met. It's not important. But they wrote a best-selling novel together, and then something happened behind the scenes, and they stopped speaking and they stopped writing together. And this book details what happens when they come back together to write another book. Will they repair their relationship? Oh, gee, I wonder. I just found this insufferable. I didn't like the characters. I thought their conflict was dumb. I thought the book took itself too seriously for such a fun premise. I thought that the advice that it gave about writing, it didn't practice in its own book. I will not be reading from these authors again. Second DNF, this is a DNF because this book is not for me, not because it wasn't good. If it sounds interesting to you, you should try it. And that is Sundial by Katrina Ward. Now, this is a case where I tried something that I didn't think I would like just as an experiment because the synopsis of this book has never called to me. I never thought it sounded interesting. It sounded like something actually that I would be actively disinterested in, but I like Katrina Ward so much that I decided to give it a try. And I said, well, you never know. I'll try new things. Well, sometimes you try new things and it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And this just really wasn't for me. I found it extremely unpleasant. This is a book about a woman who her name is Rob, first of all, which is weird. She had a very traumatic past, and the book opens with her in this really toxic, abusive relationship with her husband. And then she's got these 2 daughters that she has weird relationships with. And then Katrina Ward is a weird person. She has a weird brain. She writes weird books. So I found it intellectually interesting to read this, but the actual experience of it emotionally, I hated. So I ended up stopping at like 25%, and then I just sort of skim read the rest, stopping at places, and then I looked up spoilers because I didn't want to put myself through that, but I was curious to see what was going on. I'm going to put my hair up. Hold on a minute. I'll be right back. I'm going to go be vain. Sometimes I just cannot have my hair down. I don't know why. Don't ask me to explain myself. Next up in the DNF, this is the DNF for now. Actually, this isn't a real DNF. Like, I'm not coming back to those 2. They're done forever. But I am going to come back to Grave Empire by Richard Swan. So this is his 4th epic fantasy novel. I read and really enjoyed The Empire of the Wolf, which is his previous fantasy trilogy set in this world. It takes place, I believe, 200 to 300 years after that series. I just don't think audio is the best way for me to experience this guy's writing, at least the first time through, because I started out on audio with Empire of the Wolf, which has a first-person narrator, and the first book in that series went really well for me on audio because of that first-person narrator, and because first books in a fantasy trilogy often are much easier to consume before the plot becomes increasingly more complex, or the world, or the storytelling style. Sometimes when you've got that complex of a world, like there's no way I'm doing, for example, Malazan Book of the Fallen on audio. It's just not gonna happen. I need to like stop and take notes and look backwards. Anyway, as that series went on, I just got more, like I was on audio because I started on audio and I really liked the first book, but book 2, I had a bit of a hard time paying attention to because details would just swim. And then by the time I reached book 3, the problem had escalated beyond bearing, and I should have known that. I figured though, because it was the first book, I'd be fine. But it turns out his writing style, his ideas, his characters, they just don't work well for me on audio anymore. I just could not pay attention for the life of me. And when you don't pay exact attention to this type of book, the longer the book goes on, the less you take in, the more you miss. So I was like, I'm cutting my losses. I was like 40% in, and I said, I'm going to come back to this in hard copy. But first, I want to reread Empire of the Wolf because there's so much I did not remember. I know he was making references to stuff left and right that I just did not remember. I'm going to reread that in hard copy because I own them all in hard copy, even though I have them all in audio also. Moving on, that was a DNF, but I will come back to it probably in a couple of years because I don't know if I'll be able to reread Empire of the Wolf. Oh, Miriam, you're having a sale. Bingo books. I thought I got excited for a second that I sold a book, but I did not. Now, I don't have any 1 or 2 stars, again, because I DNF'd. Although, technically I do have 2 2-star books, but I do in half-star increments, and these are 2.5-star reads. I feel... Oh, I missed a DNF. Hold on. Sundial would have been a 3. Grave Empire, I'm pretty sure, will be a 4. Although, maybe once I'm paying attention to it, I will like it better, because it's getting really good reviews. And the third DNF, which I just skipped over, was The Seventh Veil of Salome by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This was a book club read, and I had actually been really looking forward to this because I love stories about old Hollywood, and I like historical fiction that focuses on that kind of thing. And at first it was going good when it was focusing on the Hollywood part of it, but then I just could not pay attention. It was so dull. I ended up DNFing it because it was so boring. I honestly think I might have ended up giving it 2-star, maybe even a 1-star. I feel like if I would have kept going, I would have become resentful of it, and that usually ends up with a 1-star. Now let's talk about books I actually finished. I do have two 2.5-star books, so I guess those are 2 stars to other people, but they're 2.5 stars to me because they can go either way, round up or round down. One of them is rounded down, one of them is rounded up. The one I rounded down is Queens of Crime by Marie Benedict. Now, this is the second book I've read by this author. I also read her other Agatha Christie themed book, which was The Mystery of Mrs. Christie, which was a fictionalized account of what happened to Agatha Christie in the 11 days she went missing. And she never talked about it in real life. Nobody actually knows where she went or what happened to her. But it just was so mediocre. I should have known better. I should have known that I wasn't going to like this, but I was like, I'll give it a shot because the premise sounds like catnip. So the premise of this book is, again, Agatha Christie is in it, but the narrator is actually Dorothy L. Sayers, who wrote the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries. I read the first book in that series last October, and I do plan to eventually continue. Dorothy Sayers has influential in putting together this real life club that mystery writers were in England, and it was it in the 30s? I think so. 1930. It's called the Detection Club. So she and Agatha were founding members of the Detection Club in real life and included all the British mystery and crime authors of the day that were at all influential. And so this book starts with Agatha and Dorothy trying to get other women writers in to this club, and the men, they receive pushback from the men. The plot kicks off when the men are not happy that these women make it into this club, so they decide to prove themselves worthy. Which, first of all, you shouldn't have to do that, and it really rubs me the wrong way that that's what this book is. They try to solve a real-life mystery. They pick one that seems likely, and then they travel to France to try to solve this mystery of this missing girl whose body has just been found. And they solve it, and this sounded awesome. First of all, because I love mysteries. I like books about real-life figures, especially writers, and I love women bucking the system, proving men wrong. And all of that thing, the 30s setting, like, it should have been great. Her writing style is so dull. She has the best characters to work with. She has an intriguing idea for a mystery and a book. And it's just so basic. It's just so very dull. I can't do it anymore. I'm not going to read another book by her. I'm not going to have her take a good premise and then just mediocre it to death. I just can't do it again. Her Agatha is a doormat. Dorothy is just a dim bulb. Like, all these women are supposedly brilliant, and they don't act like they're brilliant. Like, they're not witty, they're not clever. They're just very normal and mid, and I'm like, you need to be smart and clever and witty yourself to write smart and clever and witty people, and I think she's not really that witty and clever. I think she's a good researcher and a hard worker, and I just don't think her prose is up to it. So that's that, 2.5 stars. Best of Luck by Kate Claiborne. Now this one I rounded up to 3 stars. This is a romance. I feel like this one's on me. I normally love Kate Claiborne's books, but I just took against this one from the start, and I found myself really disinterested in the characters, and I did not care if they got together. I didn't like the male main character. And this is a series where 3 best friends win the lottery. They go in together on a lottery ticket and they win. And it's what happens to them when they are given the economic freedom to change their lives. And then they all fall in love. Book 1 is good. Book 2 is excellent. And then this one, it was a miss for me. I don't know if maybe it was the ebook format. I did the other one's hard copy. I don't know. But it was just a miss. So moving on. Okay, next up are my 3 stars. First up is an audiobook that I'm really disappointed in. Actually, I wanted more from it. It's not a bad book at all. It's a debut. It's called Blob, a Love Story by Maggie Sue. I heard about this from Kayla at Books and Lala, but I feel like sometime last year when this book was announced, she said she was going to read it and she was going to do a sentient object romance vlog, which she's done. It's posted now. I'll link it down below. For some reason, the premise of this one really tickled me, and I put it on my TBR and I requested it at the library. I ended up listening to it on Spotify though, because there was a wait. Basically what this is about, it's about a young, disaffected, very lonely and friendless girl who sort of has no personality of her own. She's been recently dumped by her boyfriend, who she spent 2 years trying to mold herself to become the perfect person for, and he just dumped her and dismissed her. And one day she finds a gelatinous blob with eyes behind a bar, and she takes it home, and she realizes it's alive, and she starts feeding it cereal, and then it starts growing. All it does is watch TV all day, so it very quickly learns the language, and then it becomes gradually a human man who's very good looking, a very good looking man. She names him Bob, and she molds him into her perfect boyfriend. The idea behind this is so delightful, and honestly, if it would have been more her with Bob, and then her life and everything was like background to that, I think I would have given this a 4.5, maybe even a 5. But it was mostly her, especially in the first half of the book. It's just mostly her talking about her life, her lack of friends, her history, and it was just like, oh, you are so unpleasant. Not like I didn't like her, but like, oh, there's something about a sad sack, you know, a sad sack with no personality. The second half was a lot more interesting once Bob got Bobified, but this could have been better. But it was an interesting debut, and I would definitely read more from this author. The audiobook was pretty good. I ended up giving it 3 because my engagement with it was very low. I had a hard time picking it back up when I put it down. That's never a good sign. Next up is The Extinction of Irina Ray. So this is a book that I bought on a whim at the Tucson Festival of Books last year because I was at this panel accidentally. Like, I didn't really want to be at this panel, but I was escorting the authors because I was late in registering and I didn't get the authors that I wanted. Anyway, this sounded really interesting. It is about a group of translators who come together to translate this famous Polish author's latest book. And she lives in the middle of a primeval forest in Poland. It's obviously a play on Olga Tokarczuk, who Jennifer Croft translates a lot of her works. She's a Nobel Prize winning author for literature. And these translators are like, they basically are in a cult of this author, and she controls them, and she controls the way they translate. And then the author goes missing and the translators have no idea what to do. They kind of run amok in this house and in this forest. What really sold me on this one, though, is that the book is a so the narrator is Spanish. Like, that's what the book calls her, is Spanish, because all these translators don't have names. They go by their language. At least the first half, they don't have names. So it's Spanish, English, German, French, Swedish, etc. And Spanish has written a book, but she wrote it not in Spanish and not in English. She wrote it in Polish about their experiences with this author disappearing. And it is told from decades later, so far in the future. And the English translator is translating Spanish's manuscript from Polish to English, and she puts footnotes in to correct the narrative, and they have this, like, they don't like each other, so they have this, like, beef, and it's, like, carried on throughout the footnotes. and in the main text in how Spanish describes English. I don't know. So that sounded really good to me, and it was good. Ultimately, I thought this, though, was more of an intellectual exercise. I mean, it's lit fic, than it was emotionally engaging. If it had, like, hit more emotional notes for me, I would have given it a 4. But it was just, it felt more like an experiment, like a fun experiment, than it did a story to me, if that makes sense. If you like lit fic, you guys might really like this. The Return of Valley Black by Amiko Jean. This is a thriller about a girl who returns after being missing for a long time, and also follows the cop who was looking for her. This was fine. It was a predictable thriller. It went into an aspect of thrillers that I don't really love, but I won't spoil what that is. It's fine. I'm going to unhaul this. It was a fine read. I'm glad I read it, but I won't revisit it. I don't know if I'll read any more thrillers from this author, although I do have a contemporary fiction book by her that I need to read. Next up is another book where my engagement was really low, but it was really short, so it didn't matter as much. Alpal says this is a 3, although I kind of want to give it a 3.5, but whatever, it's fine. And that's The City in Glass by Nevo. This was my first book by this author. I will try her again, but I will say the reason I had been reluctant to try her in the first place bore fruit, because I had the feeling that she was more of a literary fantasy author than she was a fantasy author. And what I mean by that is that she focuses more on the style and the theme than on the emotion and the character. I was very intrigued by this story, which is about a demon. A demon isn't like a being from hell in this world. Basically, it just means something that is not an angel. It's like very like full of chaos, and I don't know. It's really hard to explain. I really liked the way that the author treated demons in this book. But she's very capable of love and family, and she basically adopts this city called Azrael, and we follow it in flashbacks as she builds it up from being just a little city off of the coast into something great and beautiful that she thinks is beautiful. And she gets to know the citizens, and she follows them through the decades, and she basically just mothers the city. And then one day, angels come from on high and raze the city to the ground. It's never explained why they did this, ever. But she becomes so enraged when this happens that she attacks one of the angels and puts a piece of herself inside him. And it is a curse. And he spends hundreds of years, because he's exiled from having this piece of her inside of him. He's corrupted. He basically falls in love with her. And then eventually she falls in love with him too. But this is mostly about them shepherding the city back to life from after being razed to the ground. And it takes like thousands of years. I don't know. I just feel like it was really removed. And again, it was more of like a thought experiment of a novel than something that I could emotionally relate to. Even in the most affecting moments, the stuff that would come after the affecting moments would sort of like temper that and pull me back again. So 3 stars. Now 3.5 stars. First up is Lost in Time by A.G. Riddle. This is a science fiction thriller. So it's basically what I like to call a very specific type of thriller. It is a dumb science thriller. That is a book that is at the same time smart, but also dumb. And it's smart in that it is very focused on scientific concepts, and the plot is really elaborate and well thought out, and it's full of twists and turns. And then the dumb part comes both in the fact that you don't really have to be very smart or pay attention very much, even though these scientific concepts are coming at you. They're explained in such a way that they are easily consumable. And then also, that's like a positive way of putting dumb. And then the other way is that usually it has very thin characters, which this does, because the focus is not the characters, it is the plot. So what this is about is a man who, he's already a widower, and he's dating this woman who works in this company with him, and this company that he runs is called Absalom, and what Absalom does is it puts criminals in the past in an alternate universe, so they are removed from this universe forever, and thus they are purifying the universe. Okay, that's where it starts. And then this woman is murdered that he's been dating, and he is accused of the murder, and so is his daughter. And in order to protect his daughter from going to jail or being transported back in time, he confesses. But he also gets a note saying, confess or we will, basically threatening him to confess. And so he's sent back in time to the age of the dinosaurs. and his daughter stays in the present and tries to figure out who really killed this woman and why. It was interesting. I really liked it. I had a good time. But again, the characters were thin. Also, some aspects of the world building were a little bit naive and unbelievable. For example, the whole premise that sending criminals into the past as a deterrent would even work, let alone basically eliminate crime, which is a claim in this book, is absurd. Punishment is not a deterrent for people who are going to commit a crime. It's not. If you look at the statistics, the argument in this book is that it's a deterrent because people know what death is and people know what jail is, and what they face on the other end of Absalom is the unknown, and people fear the unknown more than they fear death, which, first of all, I think that's false. Because what is death if not the unknown? I think that most people are very afraid of death. But second of all, even if they were right, it's no different than capital punishment. Like, it's not going to deter, I don't know, it's not going to deter anyone from crime. If the basic causes of crime are still there, there's still going to be crime. End of rant. This is a 3.5-star book. I had a good time listening to it, but it's a dumb science thriller, so it is disposable. Moving on. Next up is a manga. I Hear the Sunspot Volume 1. This is a young adult manga following a boy who befriends a deaf boy in Japan. And it's the start of their friendship/relationship. I believe they eventually fall in love, but I had a fine time, but I don't feel very compelled to continue, so I will never see them actually get together. If they do, in fact, get together, this will be the only volume I read. The Road to Roswell by Connie Willis. This was a fun book with a terrible ending and all of Connie Willis's flaws and foibles as a writer. So I was going to give this a 3.5, probably rounded up to 4 until it hit the ending, and then the book just stops. There's no sequel planned. It just stops. And I found that upsetting. This is a book about Roswell. A woman whose name is Francie is going to her best friend's wedding, and the best friend is marrying a UFO nut, and she's going there to try to help her stop the wedding because this man is unstable. But before she can do that, she is kidnapped by an alien. And the alien is looking for something and can't talk. He's made of tentacles. He doesn't have eyes or a mouth. They call him he, though, for some reason. Couldn't have been it or they or she even. She ends up calling him Indy because he uses his tentacles like a whip to restrain them, and he can make the tentacles really long and thin so they go really far and they're really strong. As their little weird road trip continues, they pick up more and more people, like, and he just keeps kidnapping people. And they're trying to figure out what he wants because he ends up being very lovable, and they teach him, well, they get to know him. Okay. And then it's kind of a caper, it's kind of a romance, it's kind of a sci-fi, kind of about aliens. So I had a good time. Just know that the ending, it just stops. Next up is The Bones Beneath My Skin by TJ Klune. This is a book that he wrote in 2018. It was originally self-published because his indie publisher told him it was quote-unquote too weird. He explains this in the afterword of the book. And it was a weird book, but it wasn't that weird. It's about a guy who is fired from his job at the Washington Post for doing something naughty, and he is gay, and this is relevant because his family disowned him when they caught him with his boyfriend when he was younger, and he hasn't seen or spoken to his mother, his father, or his brother in 7 years. But his mother and his father have died in a gruesome way. It's not important what it is for the story, but you don't need to know. And left him a truck and a cabin. So he's like, I have nothing else to do. I'm just gonna go get this truck and then go to this cabin, and then that's where his planning stopped. But when he gets to the cabin, there is a man and a young girl there having broken in and squatting. The girl is special. Somebody's clearly chasing them. They are on the run. They're hiding. And this is what happens when they sort of get to know each other, and he becomes involved with them and helping them in their quest. With TJ Klune, there's always a fine line between this is quirky and fun and this is too schmoopsy to be bearable. He's very fond of putting the words on the page and letting the characters say the emotion instead of finding a way to make you feel the emotion. Like, sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't. Like, he can swap back and forth, and I think his later stuff has been better at making you feel the emotion rather than having the characters say it. But again, this was published before The House in the Cerulean Sea. It was his schmoopsiest book yet. It was so corny. I had a good time, and I liked the characters, and I liked the story. Part of me wishes another author had taken this exact story and written it with a little bit more biting wit and less sentiment, because I feel like I could have enjoyed that a lot, but I had a good time. So next up, can't do that yet, is a art copy that I had of Cleavage by Jennifer Finney Boylan. This book has a subtitle. I'm too lazy to look it up right now. I've put the cover here so you can read the subtitle yourself. But basically, don't be fooled by this gorgeous, amazing cover. This is not a book about pop culture and men and women. It is a memoir. So Jennifer Finney Boylan was famously the first notable publicly trans woman. She was on Oprah. She wrote a best-selling book that was a memoir about coming out. She's a really good writer, but this book is, and she's written other memoirs and books since, but this book specifically is designed as a follow-up to her first book. After 22 years of being very publicly an out trans woman, like, what's her experience about gender? What's her experience as a trans woman? And it talks about how her life has been affected by this after that coming out in her 40s. I think she's in her 60s now. This is a gorgeously written book. Like, I kept having to stop the audiobook, which is really good, by the way, and listen to the words and think about the ideas. She is a good writer, but part of me was just disappointed by the expectation. I requested this book because it looked like it was going to be half memoir, half pop culture analysis, or half cultural analysis at least. Because that picture on the cover, I mean, that's Raquel Welch judging the hell, giving the stank eye to Jane Mansfield, and it's we're gonna talk about boobs, right? Cultural boobs? No. The title means something different, and I mean, it's a play on boobs, but it's also a play on another meaning of the word cleavage. And it's a very good book. I just wish it had been marketed better, and that it was very clear that it was a memoir, not a nonfiction book about men and women and gender roles. Because, I mean, those ideas are in there, but they are secondary and tertiary to Jennifer's story, if that makes sense. So it's a really well-written book, and it's really good. I highly recommend it. Just know that it's a memoir. It's not, first and foremost, a book about culture. Then I read Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen, which is a really good time. So it's a book about an audiobook narrator and another audiobook narrator who fall in love. One of them loves their job and one of them hates their job. Also, the girl, she never narrates romance, so it's also a book about romance novels and the romance community. But my favorite thing and it was really well written, it was fun, and I enjoyed the look into the life of an audiobook narrator. But my favorite part, and this isn't a spoiler, is that for once there was appropriate groveling in a romance novel. And I can't even tell you how pleased it made me, because one of my main complaints when I read a romance novel where the man really f***s up royally is there's not enough groveling. There's not enough of that person making themselves visibly abject towards the other person as a show of their sorrow or their regret. A lot of really serious conflicts are sometimes brushed over really quickly in romance, and it bothers me. And in this book is the best groveling scene I've ever read. He literally grovels. I mean, he's half joking, but he is also extremely sorry, and you can tell. And it was beautiful. Anyway, this was 4 stars, and it was a fun time. And Julia Whalen, the author, narrates it herself. I'm sure many of you know who Julia Whalen is. She's a very prolific and talented audiobook narrator who I saw for the first time as a child actor in a TV show called Once and Again. And she had a, I believe, queer storyline before that was something that TV really did. Good times. Challenger by Adam Higginbotham. This is the story of the Challenger disaster. But again, go in with the correct expectations, because the book doesn't really tell you. The first half of the book is sort of a history of NASA's major doings to give you context for everything that happens in the Challenger disaster and everything leading up to it. And then the second half, you really get into the nitty-gritty of what happened. You meet the people, everything. The first half was really interesting, but I kept waiting for that second part to come in. I feel like if you know going in that the first half is NASA, big NASA overview, main events, context, and then the second half is the show, you'll be okay. Because that second half was a whopper. I got so into it. I got so angry. I got so upset listening to and getting to know these people who you know are going to die terribly, pointlessly, is so upsetting. And the author, I don't want to say milks it, but he gets it across, okay? And I made the mistake of going to Wikipedia before I'd finished the book, and there were pictures of the crew and a video clip of the explosion, and it made me even more upset. Like, I viscerally felt these people and their absence and the moment of their deaths. Like, I felt it. It was a good book. It was a good book, but it was rough. And the first half was not as interesting as, emotionally interesting as the second half. Because you don't come here for the history of NASA. You came here for Challenger. So Challenger's the second half. Just know that. Just, okay, 4 stars. I have to leave my house in 30 minutes. I'm going to a comedy show. I'm going to see Maria Bamford. So I can't be late. And then In the Company of Witches by Orly Wallace. This is a cozy fantasy mystery. Actually, one of the best ones I've ever read. It's very well written for a cozy. I love the story. I like the characters. I liked the audiobook a lot. It was a really good time, and I've already got the second book out from the library. Hopefully I can start listening to it soon. I mean, it's a murder mystery. You guys know. Witches. Coziness. There's a cat. I'm really tired. What if I film the rest of this later? I'm just gonna go really fast. I can't believe I'm already at 41 minutes and there's only 27 books in this video. Next up is my 4-star books, and the first one is A Kiss Before Dying by Ira Levin. I actually did the audio on this one because his books work really well for me on audio, and I'm really glad I did that because I really enjoyed the experience of listening to the audiobook. And I ended up giving this 4 stars, like I said. Rosemary's Baby is still my favorite, but this is on par quality-wise, if not theme-wise, with The Stepford Wives. This was a good time. So it follows this man named, well, actually, I don't think that you're supposed to know his name. Hold on. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you his name because that will mess you up. Like, some of them say his name, and I'm like, what are you doing? You can't say his name. A young man who is in college, and he is a bit ruthless, and he's very ambitious, and he's dating this girl named Dorothy, and then one day Dorothy comes to him, and she tells him she's pregnant, and this is not good for him. This is not in his plans, and so he's just like, what if I killed her? The plot kicks off with his plot to murder her, and you feel that whole, and then stuff happens, okay? And it gets, for 1953, this gets very twisty. Like, you could publish this today and it would still be really good. He was before his time, man. He was just before his time. He was very talented. I really enjoyed this a lot. I don't want to say too much though, because that's all you should know going in, is that plot. Highly recommend. Fellowship of Puzzle Makers. This is also a 4-star. This is a contemporary book, sort of mystery-ish, about a young man named Clayton who was abandoned on the doorstep of the Fellowship of Puzzle Makers as an infant, and nobody knows where he came from. He doesn't know who his parents are, but he was raised by this woman, the founder of the Fellowship, named Pippa. She was basically his mother, although he never called her mom. He called her Pippa. And she dies. And this kicks off a journey for him to find where he came from. And she basically, in the last months of her life, prepared this like puzzle quest for him. It also has flashbacks into her founding the Fellowship of Puzzle Makers, which is basically a commune on a British estate where really clever people live in a community together and make puzzles. So it was a fun time. It wasn't mind-blowing, but if that sounds at all interesting to you, this is a really well done version, I think, of what you'll be looking for. Okay, next up is a book I can't really talk about because it's book 3 in a series of very long and complicated fantasy novels. Well, it's not that complicated, but it's whatever. Who cares? This is Song Rising by Samantha Shannon. This is the 3rd book in the Bone season. I am having a really good time with this. Again, all I can say is I'm really glad I gave this series another chance, and I'm really glad she rewrote it. Obviously, I read the first book twice, once in the old initial version, the original version, and then once in the edited, updated version, and it was night and day. So I don't know how much she changed for the second book and the 3rd book, but it was a good time. And I'm very excited to get to books 4 and 5. I think book 4 I'm going to read this month, and book 5 next month. It worked out that all of my 4.5-star books are the best new books that I read this month. So let's talk about them. First up, Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales So I ended up giving this 4.5 stars rounded down. It was a good ending to the series if it is in fact the end. And I had a good time, but it does start pretty slow. Like the first third of the book, you feel kind of aimless before it really kicks in and you find out what's really going on. So I couldn't give it a full 5, but I was very emotionally satisfied by the end of this book. Then I have Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I actually rounded up to 5 stars on this one, but it is a 4.5. This is a romance book about a young woman named Eve who becomes unexpectedly pregnant after a one-night stand. And it is her journey into becoming the kind of person and what becoming pregnant and the idea of becoming a parent does to you as a person. And then she also happens to find her person who is the brother of her best friend. It was just really sweet. It was really well done. I loved the dialogue. I loved their chemistry. I loved the secondary characters. It was just really, really nice. Oh, randomly, I did want to register a complaint. Sorry, this was like 5-10 books ago. The Bones Beneath My Skin by TJ Klune. I did want to say that there was a sex scene, a graphic sex scene in the middle of the book, and I thought it was totally out of place. I think that it should have either been much less graphic or fade to black, because it just felt so out of place in the wholesome atmosphere of the rest of the book. Tonally, just let's go pop off and have a sex scene and then be really explicit and then go back to this found family situation we've got going on. And then what is actually the best new book that I read this month is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar. This is an ARC. I got an audio ARC. Now, I just need you guys to know, if you are at all interested in this book, you need to do the audio. Usually I'm just like, if you like audio, do it, you know, or like I'll like firmly suggest. I'm saying that you need to do the audio on this book. Buy yourself an ebook copy to read along. Buy yourself a hard copy if you want one. But you are doing yourself a disservice to not do the audiobook. So what this book is it's a novella. It's about 2 sisters, and they live in a magical version of our world. They live on a farm. They sort of farm magic, but in this world, magic is called grammar, and it's wackadoodle. If you read This Is How You Lose the Time War, and it's absurdly poetic language, like, it's not absurdly poetic here, but like the concepts are. I don't know, it's hard to explain. I wasn't too sure about it at the beginning, but the audiobook narrator has a beautiful voice, and her name is Jem Carmela. You bet your butt I will be looking for other audiobooks narrated by her. She has a beautiful voice, so it sort of just soothed me into keeping going when I wasn't sure about what was going on at the beginning. But then it just sort of becomes this lyrical fairy tale about these 2 sisters and the power of like the sisterly bond when it's strong. I believe that I read in somebody else's review that it's a reworking of a folktale, but I can't remember the name of it and I'm not familiar with it, so I'm only taking it on its own merits, not as a retelling or a comment on a previous story, if that makes sense. These sisters sing to these willow trees that are on their property that produce their income. The singing is in the audiobook. So it has sound effects, like it has rain, it has thunder, it has a bunch of stuff like that. So it's like a high quality production audiobook. And then at first it was just like background singing, but then like about halfway through the book, the narrator herself, voicing one of the 2 sisters, just starts singing. And the songs are really good. Like, I was getting full body goosebumps from listening to these songs. They're like folk songs. I'm not sure. They have a very Gaelic, Welsh, old-timey feel to them, but the narrator's voice is so beautiful. Like, I want somebody to take those songs and put them on like a track, and so I can download it to my phone and listen to it without having to listen to the audiobook. And it was just like, you can talk about music in books, but you can't experience music in books until now. You hear the song, you hear the words, you hear her beautiful voice, and it just hits you differently. Like, I think I would have rated this maybe 3.5, 4 stars without the audiobook, because it was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoy that type of story. But the singing and the emotion of the singing just took it to a whole another level, and I bumped it. Well, it was a 4.5, and I bumped it up to 5 because I can't stop thinking about it. And I really liked the end of the story. I mean, again, it is a fairy tale, so it's like fairy tale logic, but I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend. Now, I've seen complaints that it's pretentious and that it is too flowery, just for the sake of being flowery. But I don't think that's true. I am very allergic to flowery language with no purpose. And I'm very allergic to flowery language when not done well. And this is neither. If you don't like flowery language, you don't like it, that's fine. But this is very well done. And even though it's not necessarily my preference, it definitely had a purpose. Like, it puts you in a place, it puts you in an emotion, it puts you in a state of mind, and it gets you there. And it's very good. And I enjoyed it very much. And I hope this convinces some of you to try the audio if you were not going to before. I hope I haven't built it up too much, but I was just sitting there, like, listening while I was at work, and just the singing, it like shocked my system. Anyway, 4.5 stars. Because I'm at 53 minutes, I'm going to talk about all of these books in one go, because they are all previous books of mine that I've given 5 stars, because they are rereads, and all of the 5-star reads that I had this month were rereads. And that's The Hunger Games. This is the illustrated edition. Second one, by the way, they just announced for Catching Fire. That's coming out in September. So I'm on that. But yeah, I listened to The Hunger Games narrated by Tatiana Maslany, and it was very good. That book gets better every time I read it. And then I, of course, had to continue on into Catching Fire, also narrated by Tatiana Maslany. And I'm sure that I will get to Mockingjay sometime very soon, once I get rid of some books that I have to read for stuff. And then I also continued my big Cosmere reread with Mistborn, which is the first book in the Mistborn series. So I read this once, gave it 4.5 stars, rounded up to 5. I think it was like 2013 that I read it. And then I did the audiobook in 2020 when I reread all the Mistborn books. And I actually had less of a good time with it that time. I'm not sure if it was just my mindset or the audiobook experience. But I mean, I love Michael Kramer, but I liked it less the last time. And then this is the most I've ever liked this book. And that is because I read it over the course of 3 weeks. I tabbed, I annotated. And the way that changed my mindset, like just getting me interacting with this material, made me appreciate it and be so much more emotionally involved in it than I ever have before. So I'm very excited about this whole Cosmere reread thing now that I'm doing it this way, because I feel like I'm going to appreciate it more than I ever have. And then my last book of the month, and my favorite, which isn't a surprise because it's one of my favorite books of all time, is The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I just did a reread in 2020, but I wanted to read them again because I have the Andy Serkis audiobooks and I want to listen to them. Last time I read it, I did it on this movie tie-in bind-up paperback that I have that has just the ring and Sauron's finger on it. And this time I'm doing the Andy Serkis books. But I wanted to show you my ancient copies that I first read these books on. Found them in my Aunt Mare's basement. And she was like, yeah, you can have those. I never read them. I was like, I'll score. 5 stars. 5 stars for Andy Serkis. 5 stars for Frodo. 5 stars for J.R.R. Tolkien. Although, I will say, I usually skip or speed read the songs, especially the songs of Tom Bombadil, who I would punch in the nuts if I met him. He is infinitely more irritating on audio. Just so irritating, so annoying. I do not like him. And Andy Serkis, bless him. For people who like Tom Bombadil, I'm sure this was like a prime experience, but he makes the choice to like basically sing most of his dialogue. So not only do we get the Tom Bombadil songs, we also get his dialogue with a melody. And I'm like, God damn it, I hate you, Tom Bombadil. 5 stars. I'm sure I will get to Two Towers sometime this month, and then Return of the King in April, because I want to spread it out. And then probably the Silmarillion, because I also have the Andy Serkis Silmarillion sometime in May. Anyway, I have finally finished this video. I'm losing my voice. It's 57 minutes, and I have to leave to go see Maria Bamford. So if you've made it this far, hopefully I've got it cut down a lot from that, because that's ridiculous. 57 minutes. But if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video or the channel or whatever, and you would like to support me, please remember to give me a like and subscribe if you haven't already and you want to. I mean, like, if you don't want to subscribe, honestly, if you don't want to subscribe, don't, because I get so unhappy and sad when I gain a follower and then I lose a follower. I'm like, you're gonna follow me, please commit. This is a long-term relationship. I'm just kidding. You guys can do what you want, obviously. I can't stop you, but just know that it makes me sad. So, like, if you're on the fence about me, maybe just give it a few videos and just see if I'm for you before you commit, because I get sad. Thank you for watching, and if you don't have anything else to say, please leave me a ring emoji for Lord of the Rings, and I will see you guys in the next video. Okay, love you, bye.